This episode is brought to you by Encore Business Group, Erik Kramer Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Williams Chiropractic, Elite Winning Solutions, and Sal's Complete Home Painting and Handyman Services. Shayne Graham's Extra Points with Ron Walsh airs live Thursdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm.
Because we got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. We got Jeff Isaac in studio keeping us on track here. He'll be jumping into the show as we go, but we wanted to start off kind of hot here. So Shayne's not in studio this week. He'll be back probably in 2 weeks if I've got his travel schedule straight here. He's got a lot of different events for coaching, and now as we head into the off season for his coaching school here. So I think he'll be back in the fray for February here. But we wanted to kick off our interview series that we're going to do during the off season. I know it's not the off season for the NFL as a whole, but it's the Lions off season. We'll still cover the playoffs both on the college and pro side, but we're going to kind of do a long-form interview series. Right now I'm calling it Declassified, NFL Declassified, to lean into the sports intel side of things. But we have a lot of interesting and inspiring individuals that are associated with the show that I've met through the show or through other walks of life. And sometimes it's hard, especially on the radio, to really unpack the situations that they've dealt with that led to their careers, that happened after their careers, because the part about there's a lot of different parts about the professional career as opposed to a professional football career or athletic career as opposed to a quote unquote normal career. You usually have a lot shorter timeline on it. You're done by 30, 35, 40, and then you have a whole nother life after that if you want to, and they all kind of take on different iterations, and these are top 0.1% performers at their field, so the fact that they'd be talented at another field is not that surprising. So there's a lot of different stories and different layers of things that we'll have, but some of these will probably be in parts, and this will be one that will probably be in parts because this is somebody you've heard on this show before as well as my Sports Intel show. I've had the privilege of meeting him through the show, and I've met him in person. Very interesting story, and I thought he was a perfect one to kick this off. So we got Erik Kramer on the line. We can do a little Bears analysis if you've got stuff for us. Otherwise, I'm good with kind of launching into the interview because, like I said, I think we're going to have a lot to break down. But any thoughts on the way in on the Bears game? They like to keep you on the edge of your seat here. The Bears don't like to lock anything in too early. They like the second half a lot better than the first half. Oh, we're not hearing Erik. Hopefully Jeff's figuring it out here. You on, Erik? I hear something in the background. Don't hear a dial tone, thankfully, unlike the other call. Jeff's going to figure that out here. I'm not sure if he's, I think, maybe going to call Erik back, but we're gonna try to figure out the communication issues. But the Bears are funny to me. Hopefully, we'll get a little Bears analysis from Erik. But they just don't like to. They don't like to start fast here. They have to have some stakes to get it going. So, Erik, do we have you on? Wait. You there, Erik? Okay. No, we're not hearing them. Are you there? No, I don't think we have him, Jeff. So Jeff's going to figure that out. But it was a divisional matchup between the Packers and the Bears, and they we got some static. If you give me a dial tone, Jeff, for the second time in like a month, I'm going to be really shocked. We had a dial tone, I think, on the other show, and I couldn't believe that somebody was calling from a landline phone. So I did like it, though. Then we knew that the person was not on the line. But a lot of good matchups. I'm going to talk about these with Jeff later because these playoff matchups have been really some of the better ones in recent years, between Packers, Bears. I mean, all the matchups, basically every matchup but the Steelers and the Texans were marquee matchups. It seems like the NFL kind of got what they wanted. I think the people that assume that the NFL is scripted, which I can't believe it's that big of a group. I don't know what percentage it would be, but it's probably over 10, which is insanely high. But because guys like Erik Kramer would be able to tell you that it's not, and how you would organize all of these thousands of people to script these games, it's the best performance that anybody's ever put on. But now with the coaching carousel starting, I think it's the most interesting coaching carousel that we've had in years too, with Harbaugh and Tomlin and all of the openings that they have. So we're excited to talk with Erik. Hopefully, if we can get him on. We're having some technical difficulties, but I'm going to cover some of these matchups a little bit, because I was going to do this with Jeff at the end, but the upcoming matchups are interesting to me, because I think they got a second round that's maybe as interesting as the first round. You got Bills at Broncos. That's I think a team that people believe that the line is only 1.5 for that game. So I think people have more belief in the Bills really than the Broncos, even though the Broncos are the higher seed. They got the first round bye. That's the team that should be pretty heavily favored in this game. But I think that there's a lot of belief out there. I haven't seen the betting splits and what people are betting, but I have to assume that's a heavy one for the Bills, because you got Josh Allen. I think there's a lot of people that have the belief that they're going to be in the Super Bowl. I'm kind of on that train. If there's a team that I expect to come out of the AFC, I think it's the Bills, even with the injuries here. So you have those two that are vying for the next round. The Broncos are solid. They've got a younger quarterback, but they've got Sean Payton at the helm. They've got a great defense, kind of an underrated defense. They've got good weapons. So between that, I still kind of would look at the Bills, but then you've got the 49ers Seahawks. That's a NFC West battle. That division is quietly, we've been talking about it with different folks on the show, because we've been covering the West at different times for the counter intel segments or for the analysis segments, but that division is quietly probably the best in the NFL. It has the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Rams. They play out west. We've talked about this. It's funny to me that this still exists, because I watch a lot of these games so I can stay informed for the show, and because I'm a sports fan as well. But it's funny to me that in the modern day, that the time difference is now basically neutralized. You can record all these games. You got YouTube TV, whatever your provider is. You can record the game and watch it anytime. You can watch it over breakfast the next day. You can watch it 2 weeks later. It doesn't matter. But still, in the Midwest or the East Coast, we don't pay as much attention to those games that happen later in the day. Even with football, where football is so uniform that those games are happening at 4:00 in the afternoon here. They're not happening late. It's not like they're starting at 10 o'clock at night like a college schedule. So it's funny to me that gets people less press, but I do think that's what's happening with this division. The Seahawks are quietly one of the best teams in football. They've got kind of the old school combination of like what the Ravens used to have. There's a few teams like this, the old school Bucks when they had Trent Dilfer, the Ravens when they had Joe Flacco. They've got a great defense and a competent quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over a lot, has been efficient. Now Darnold has been kind of fluttering a little bit down the stretch, so that's something to watch. We saw that as Lions fans last year, because that was a big storyline for that last game that was for the division that made the Lions 15-2. And I'm hearing something here, Jeff. I think I'm going to check. Erik, are you on? Nope. I thought I heard somebody. Sorry. So you had the game last year that the Lions became 15-2, the Vikings became 14-3. That game, Darnold was really the story. He was kind of fluttering a little bit. He was a little flustered by the Lions defense, and a couple of those games down the stretch, really that Lions game, even though they were as we chronicled on Sports Intel, they were very much injured. They didn't have the defensive reinforcements. They really dominated Darnold on that side of the ball. And then I think in the playoffs, they used that same blueprint to beat him. Now, this is a different team. He's in a different offensive system. He's got different weapons, but it'll be interesting to see if, since the 49ers have now played them twice, if this is something where, since they've seen Sam Darnold twice, it'll be easier for them to defend him and figure him out, so to speak, because they've played him twice, and I think we forget this, but he was also on the team for a short time. So you've got all those things. Okay, Jeff's giving me the thumbs up here. Erik, are you on?
I am.
Hey, there he is. We got him. So sorry to make you listen to me here for 12 minutes, Erik, but I wanted to make sure to fill while we were trying to figure out our technical difficulties. So unfortunately, we'll have to take a break in a few, and then we'll get into the interview proper here after that. But on the way in, any thoughts? Since I've been talking about the playoffs here a little bit, I left the Bears-Packers game for you because, one, you can give me better analysis on any of these than I can. But especially Bears-Packers, were there things that stuck out to you there? Because, man, they like to keep you on the edge of their seat. They don't like to start off fast, but they finish pretty strong. Your Bears here.
They do. If you're within 50 and there's 4 minutes to go on the clock, don't fall asleep.
Exactly.
The Bears, they bring, for some reason, they've got this thing. Maybe it's, I hope it's not consciously, but they have decided the first 56 minutes of any game are really not worth playing. It's just those last 4 minutes.
And it's a strategy that's worked out pretty well for him. It has to be a little maddening, but I remember I was at a restaurant for the first half, and then I got home and I watched it the next day, kind of talking about the recording schedule and stuff. Sometimes I do that with these games, but I watched the rest the next day, and I remember when that was 21-3, I think at halftime. I remember thinking, the Bears are going to come back, right? Like, they're going to be back in this game by the end. It's funny how our brains get programmed for that, because other matchups, I wouldn't necessarily think that. I'd go, oh, they're done. Say that Texans-Steelers game. I never at any point thought the Steelers were going to come back as that game advanced. But the Bears-Packers, it was like, oh, well, 21-3. Okay, they've got it within 3 possessions. I guess this is still a game.
It's kind of like that New England Patriots come back in the Super Bowl versus the Falcons 28-3, and all the T-shirts that got made up. So this is along those lines, and I think it's great that the Bears have found something of an identity and a confidence in that when it's late in the game, they're never out of it. Like I mentioned before, though, I know that's not how anybody in Chicago or in that football building would want it. And so I think that it's really just a matter of, execution on a fundamental level throughout a game. And I think, if we're talking about Caleb Williams, I think he will get there eventually. But that's going to be interesting for me, because the guy who is at the Rams, Matt Stafford, he is that guy. He's nowhere near the athlete, or anybody is really the athlete that Caleb Williams is, but he more than makes up for it in his ability to decipher what's going on and move defenders, right? Or we've seen how many, like Matthew Stafford throwing a no-look pass happens at least, I'd say, 5 to 8 times a game. And when he's not doing that, he's still making that guy, the key defender, move one way or another in order to put the ball in. And that's what I think that, Caleb Williams isn't there yet, but the exciting part is eventually, at some point, he will be.
I agree. I mean, your bet is better than mine on something like that, but I like the Stafford comparison because he was a guy that, we saw him a lot in Detroit. You followed his career there, I'm sure, and he was a guy that had to get accustomed to playing from behind. I don't think it was necessarily a slow start issue. It was just that was usually what the game dictated for him, and so he was having to gun it. He was having less options as a quarterback, not necessarily the offensive diversity that you want, because you might have to forego some of the run game as those totals get bigger. But the Bears seem to keep it close enough where they can still keep that in the mix. That's always kind of the key point for me. I don't know how you feel about that, Erik, but it seems like that's when the game can really get out of control. If you can at least layer in the run game, then you can keep the defense on its heels. If you're just getting back there and throwing it, that can be tougher. I know that gives maybe better rhythm for a quarterback, but it also can let the D key in to what's going on.
No, I agree with you. And anybody that knows anything about the game would tell you that a good running game is any quarterback's best friend, because and the Bears are committed to running the ball, and they're very good at it. And I think what that does is open up your play action game where you get the big chunk yards at. And then the drop back passing game, you're right. That's not something you want to be doing 60 times a game, but 20 to 25, that's the perfect sweet spot for me. And I think, again, it's really just a matter of, Caleb over time, and I think there's no question he's on his way. But over time, he's going to get to the point where he can be Matthew Stafford from inside the pocket. He's not there yet, but there's a time, Matthew Stafford's been playing how long? 17 years-ish? 16, 17 years?
Something like that, yeah.
And, and he was a very good athlete, but he was never a Caleb Williams and athletically. And I think that, we all saw the pounding that Stafford took at Detroit. In fact, very early on, I don't know if it was first year or second year, I think first year, he finished that game with a separated shoulder and yet won the game. But I think Caleb, one of the positive things you can say about him is that in 2 years, he hasn't missed a game.
That is impressive. Yeah, it's the best ability is the availability here, and that's the durability is very important in both of those guys, because Stafford was that way as well. He's had some bad injuries over the years, as you mentioned, but so it'll be a good matchup. I'm excited for this one. It's kind of the old guard versus the new guard here, and so I think this will be an interesting one, and we may even have to follow up with you afterwards, depending on how things go. But we got to take a quick break here, but I want to come back on and kind of start the interview series here a little bit and get into kind of some of your backstory, because speaking of athletes, that's one of the things that I think of with your early childhood, early life, that athletics was driving everything, even from an early age. So I wanted to kick off with that and start with that. So we'll come back with Erik Kramer and start talking about his upbringing and how that kind of led to some things down the road. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. But Erik, I've read your book. I've listened to your podcast. I've obviously met you in person. I've talked to you several times. And the more I talk to you, the more I learn about the depth of your backstory and kind of how it led to everything else. And so that's why I wanted to expose that to the people here, because I think there's a lot to be learned from your story. And that's kind of the quest that you're on now, is mental health. Yes, that's part of it, but there's also a law component, and we'll talk about those things as we go on. That's why I want to do a few parts. But what was increasingly apparent to me, and the podcast actually was the thing that, even though you didn't talk about your the youth portion of your life very much on the podcast, that was the part that kind of illuminated the connection between your because we all have our youth is what forms us, and then we have these tendencies as we get later in life, and then we have to enhance some things and tamp down other things. But the thing, so I was obviously in intelligence for my background. That's a very transient career. There's a lot of moving around in that. And the thing that stuck out to me about your early life is for a child that didn't have the parents necessarily moving around, it seemed like the beginning period of your life was defined by moving, but it was less because of a parent's job and career and more for essentially to position you in youth sports. Do I kind of have that right?
That's a very accurate, I think, summation. So yeah, we never moved physically. Our residence, I shouldn't say that. I started out, we were in an apartment in North Hollywood, and when I think I was about 8 or 9 years old, we moved to Canoga Park into a house. And but I moved in there, I think I was in 5th grade. So back then, elementary school ended in 6th grade. So once I was done in 6th grade, I never went to the local school a day in my life. So I went to back then, for 7th and 8th grade, I went to a private school, probably about, at least drive-wise 30 minutes away. And then went to another, for the first semester of my 9th grade year, I went to a place called Valley Christian, that school is not even there anymore. And then in 7th and 8th grade, then for the second half of 9th grade, I went to St. Genevieve, which is a Catholic school, also about 30 or so minutes away. And then ultimately graduated from Burroughs High School, which was even further away. And and it was none of it was for anything other than to play sports. And I think that probably resonates with a lot of folks because so many parents, I think, live vicariously through their kids on some level. And in this case, that was my situation with my dad.
That was the juxtaposition that was interesting to me because that's why I kind of set it up as normally it's the parent that drives that because I'm used to military families, government families that, okay, we get an assignment overseas, so we've got to move. But this is more, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your dad kind of more was on the odd jobs path. He didn't necessarily have a lot of consistent employment. So then he kind of it was like that made him delve into your potential a little bit more, which I would assume you felt a lot of pressure as a result. I don't know if you did as a kid because maybe it was hard to notice all of the dynamics because we always have a smaller scope when we're kids and then it widens.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. While my childhood, as you mentioned, was going on, I didn't have the perspective that I have today. And looking back on it, that's when everything becomes clear. It's like, why would you do that? But during the time of it, I don't think it was necessarily. It wasn't something I would do with my kids. In fact, I didn't. And and my dad had his reasons, and we could get into that if you like. But anyway, like you said, it's not really something while it was going on that seemed out of place to me. But I will tell you that every time I did change schools, it was starting all over again. Just getting friends and that sort of thing.
I am curious about kind of those reasons, both sides of that, the reasons that he was doing that, and then the other side, because I think that helped form a lot of things for you, that transient nature. It's hard to kind of make friends and start over. You become better at that overall. Then you can go to a new town, and I guess it was applicable once you got to your career, because you moved teams several times, and you were probably used to that because of your youth. But as a younger person, that's got to be tough. So I'm curious about the reasons, and then kind of how you felt about the moving as a young person, because you go to a new school, and like you said, you don't, your best friend isn't there anymore. Whoever you knew, your teachers, you got to relearn everything. And that's hard for an adult, let alone a kid.
Right. And as you're talking right now, I'm thinking, so there was never a time when I got to say goodbye to anybody. It was just, I'm here one day, gone the next, and now I'm on to something new. And again, that's, I think everybody can see at this point anyway, that's, probably not the way to go in terms of, bringing some stability to a person's initial years of their life. But like I said, it's easy to see that in the rearview mirror at the time. And I don't even think my dad had that perspective, honestly. Unfortunately, I should, for him as a dad.
Well, so I'm curious. You're talking about how you didn't move much. Was there? I know you were moving schools. I was trying to look at this in the book, and you talked about it a little bit in the podcast, but was the impetus that he thought there were better opportunities? Because you started in baseball, where that was more, I think, kind of the drive, right? And then you moved into football. So it was more about where the athletic opportunities were, not necessarily, hey, I like this sport. Hey, I'm enjoying playing with my friends, because those weren't things for you. You didn't get to play with the same people. You didn't get to play the same sport. You just moved around and even lived, I think, did you live with a family friend at one point?
I did. Yeah, that was my last year in high school, last year and a half, I guess. And so it, I like I said, and like we've been talking about here, to me, if I had it to do all over again, if I was in charge, I would have just stayed at one school, and I would have gone to the local school, whatever it was, middle school, high school, and been done with it. So, because I think there's plenty of opportunity right in your own backyard as well. So.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and you were in a good area for sports, I would think. I've never lived in that area, obviously, and I am not familiar with it. But from what I've read from your book and other things, it seems like that was a decent area to do it. But it also seemed like he was trying to put you kind of against the right competition to a degree. You even moved to different religious schools and things, because my nephew plays for a Catholic school here, and I've kind of seen that where it's like he doesn't have a conference. He has to go 2 hours away to even play another team that's in his conference, and that's modern day here. So I can only imagine what that looked like that day. And then that's another bigger change for you, because now you're adding in the religious element from the schooling standpoint, and the conferences are way different. It's not like you're just bouncing from rival to rival within an established conference there.
Right. The first time I was ever in a church was when I was at St. Genevieve, and we had religion was a class you had to take, and so I was literally making it up as I went along, and but on the flip side of my dad, I'll say this. He was searching, I think, for his own identity, because he, as a young boy, around the age of 1.5 or 2, his own mother abandoned him. And then he didn't even grow up with his dad. His dad shipped him off to be brought up by my dad's aunt's family. So my grandpa's sister. And so, and I think it was in high school when my dad came back in high school. Back in those days, started in 10th grade, and by that time, my grandpa was on his fourth wife, and so it was tough for kids to, I think, grow up in that sort of environment. And so, I can't say that I really fault him at all. I really don't. And there's one thing I will say about my dad, and that is that no matter what the situation, he believed in me when nobody else did. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody. And so I don't think I would have ever got as far as I did without my dad or my mom, really. And so even though growing up, I wasn't close with either one of them.
That was a part of your story that kind of came together for me a little bit more as I've gotten to know you better, because that happens, I think, to a lot of people, where they obviously our parents are hugely impactful on us, but in different ways. Sometimes it helps us drive to a certain place where the difficult circumstances of a childhood help to engage you in some sort of drive that gets you further. Sometimes sometimes the lack of opportunities limit you. Obviously, if you have kind of a loving family where it's kind of like the old sitcoms and all that, then that's a different scenario. But there's so much of the butterfly effect that's involved here. But that's why I wanted to kind of set the table a little bit, because it is connected, I think, later on, and you were able to come to terms with a lot of things, I think, as you got older. So we can cover that some now, but we'll come back to that. But I wanted to talk about your mom a little bit too, because I didn't want to leave her out of the discussion. She seemed like the difference here was, I think, since your dad was more focused on maybe your side of things and kind of what you guys had going there, she had to kind of keep everything else running in the family, it seemed.
Yeah, I think, this is all conjecture on my part. But I really think, my mom, she went to work right out of high school. And she was a secretary. And later in life, after she had a couple kids, me and my sister, and we're 6.5 years apart. After she had Kelly and I, she went back to school, and she wanted to be a teacher. A PE teacher, and she, made the dean's list every year. She started out at Pierce College, which is where I went. And then ended up graduating from Cal State Northridge, and with a degree in physical education. And I think there's two reasons why she never left. And one was that, as you had alluded to before, I think there were times in my life where my dad didn't have a job. And so she couldn't go that route because teachers didn't make enough money. And she was also very loyal to her boss, because he's the only person she's ever worked for, and he was an engineer and aerospace engineer. And so, I think she had it. I have a lot of respect for her. Both my parents are passed away now. But I think I respect my mom in ways that I never did before growing up. It's not that she made it easy for me, because she didn't have a lot of affection for my dad. But I think that I think she had a lot of pressure on her, and that came out. Right. So it came out towards me at times. And so that's one of the things that one of the, it's like when I was mentioning before, I wasn't close with their parent. It was more on my mom's side because of what sort of I could tell I in some way graded on her, and just by my sheer presence, and then with my dad, I didn't really respect him, and that was why. I think I felt the pressure of my dad living through me. I felt the pressure, not the pressure of my mom, but just like she didn't come across very warm and fuzzy, at least not to me. And so that's kind of, throughout, those were hard obstacles to get over.
Definitely, especially because you don't have the perspective that you got later. You don't understand the pressure that's being put on her. You don't understand maybe that some of that is a little bit of, hey, she has certain feelings towards your dad, and so maybe some of those are inadvertently then put on you because of the familial ties and resemblance, and so that's something that we all learn more about our parents as we get older, because we get a different perspective of, oh, this is what they were dealing with, because they can't ever be dealing with anything because they've always got to be dealing with the kids.
Well, and all the other umpteen things that are going on in life. Exactly. So it does make it, when I'm a young kid or even a teenager, I don't have that perspective. I do now. I'm 61 years old now, and obviously when I was later in life, that was different. But now I think, in hindsight, for sure, I respect them both in ways that I never did, I think, while they were both alive. At least, let me say this about my mom. She got sick with uterine cancer. She found out she had stage 4 uterine cancer the day after Mother's Day in 2011, and that was a real. What do you do with that? And I think that year, really, that last year of her life, I think really showed who she really was. And all of her guards really were let down. I spent a lot of time with her then. And I'm grateful for that time we had together. She would have chemo treatments at the hospital where I would take her and stay overnight. And they don't, as bad as the hospital beds are, they don't have much. I think it was a fold-out chair I had that turned into something I could lay on. But my point is that we grew a lot closer during that time. And unfortunately, that time did end, though.
I'm glad you did get that time before it did. It always ends too quickly, but I think this is kind of a good setup for what we for a good groundwork that we've laid here, because it's such a layered story, and I appreciate you going in depth about your parents and all of that, because that comes back in the story. We'll probably put a pause in it for now because we've got to get you out of here, but I want to return to it, and then we'll probably hit your college and NFL career next, and then that'll probably take up one full interview slot, and then get to the post stuff, because that's where a lot of this stuff comes together. I know you have a lot of thoughts and things that you want to talk about for the post career stuff, because that's where a lot of your current mission and messaging comes from. But really appreciate you kicking this off with us. This was definitely a perfect choice and a perfect start to it. So appreciate you being vulnerable and talking about this stuff with us. But I want to make sure to plug the book and the podcast so people can kind of work along with us here. You got to pick up his book. You got to listen to the podcast, because that'll help with a lot of this information that we're talking about here.
Well, I really appreciate that, Ryan. And as you mentioned before, the name of the book is The Ultimate Comeback. It can be picked up on Amazon. I'm about to upload audio version here shortly, and then the podcast as well is it's concluded. So it's anywhere you find your podcast, you can listen to The Quarterback and the Con Artist, and so. I really appreciate your time, and a lot of the stuff that we are talking about, in fact, is in the book and in the podcast. So, but there's actually more than what we're talking about, at least so far. So, definitely. I really appreciate this time.
I appreciate your time, and that's why I thought we should stretch out a little bit, because there is so many layers to this, and wanted to give it due time to be able to air out. You've got a great message, great mission, and so I wanted to make sure to allocate the proper amount of time. So I appreciate it. We'll be having Erik back for part 2 of this. I'll announce the time when we're able to set something up with him, but really appreciate you joining the show, Erik, and we'll look forward to continuing this with you soon.
I appreciate that too, Ryan, and hopefully the Bears will win this weekend, and we'll see what happens where they play the following week.
That's perfect. We can follow along with the run as we go here.
All right, you got it.
All right, thanks, Erik. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Thanks to Erik Kramer. Great start to that declassified series here. Hate to cut it off, but this is why we thought of kind of the parts here. So that was a good summation of his childhood, and we'll continue with that story. But we've got to get. We're finally going to do some official IU talk. I've been doing the IU talk for the most part. Jeff's been helping me out with that. Other folks have, but we're going to have Daniel Flick of IU on SI on to preview the Indiana-Miami college football playoff championship game here. So we'll have him on after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. I actually connected with Daniel because he used to be on the Falcons beat, and we were going to have him for one of the counter intel segments. He moved over to the IU beat, and little did we know, Daniel, when you moved over there, you must have brought them this good fortune here, because when you moved over there, the Falcons haven't been great, but IU sure has. So thank you for moving over to the IU beat. I'm going to attribute it to you, since you're our rep on the show for it.
I appreciate it. I'm not sure I can take all the credit for that, man. I mean, again, I was there for 8 and 9 last year in Atlanta, so I'm not sure I had the winning pedigree necessarily. But hey, you know what? I love being called a winner, right?
Well, now IU is a team that's full of winners here. Cignetti, obviously, Curt Cignetti's obviously the linchpin of this whole operation. Him coming there has really changed not only IU, but the college football landscape here. I never would have thought. I had people asking me all through this run, knowing that I'm an alum, knowing that I cover this stuff for the shows. Hey, are you going to go to the Rose Bowl? Would you go to the semifinal? Would you go to the finals if they make it? And it was like I couldn't comprehend that IU was this now. My freshman year was Antoine Randall's senior year, and it was a very entertaining year, but they still had a losing record, and now they've advanced to this level. So it's got to be. I know you're younger than me, Daniel, but it's got to be interesting to cover this team and start out as a student, start out as somebody that saw kind of the depths that we were at as a program, and then the growth to here, because really it's been a few year journey. I've tried to refer to that on the show, that there was kind of the makings of this with the Allen years, and they had some great coaching there that moved on. That obviously Kalen DeBoer and some other folks that moved on and occupy high-ranking positions among college football, and you thought, okay, well, yeah, IU's going to be a pass-through, but now they're not a pass-through anymore. So I'm curious to see kind of the evolution of it from your side of things here as you've been on the beat.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because, year one was watching 3 and 9, right? So, I remember 3 and 9 very well, and it's kind of crazy, reflecting on, man, I just want to go cover a bowl game, right? And then all of a sudden, this will be the 4th playoff game now in about 13 months, right? Which, is a crazy thought. Because, again, it's like the mindset has just shifted so much from, I wonder if it'll be competitive this week, to I wonder how much they'll win by this week. And that's it's honestly just been incredible to watch. It's extremely surreal. It's extremely, you feel like you're watching one of the greatest stories in sports history up close and personal, but it's so hard in the moment to really appreciate it because everything is just so, you're just constantly moving. And the team obviously has this mindset of like, we're not overlooking anybody. We're always locked in on whoever's next up, right? And I feel like covering them, you don't really get much time to sit back and reflect on any of it because they don't let you. Right? Like, I mean, if you try asking about it, like you might get a little bit, but they usually don't want to reflect as much because they don't have much interest in trying to look back. It's all about trying to look forward. And so it's been incredible to watch on that front. I'm not sure any of it's really sunk in, right? Because I mean, it truly is one of the most improbable stories in all of sports, I would imagine. And it's really cool to be able to watch it up close,
I agree, and I've been talking about how surreal it's been all through these shows because it hit me like a ton of bricks that, hey, this is a team, could be the first team to 16 wins in a season like this. People are talking about maybe the greatest team of all time. I don't want to go with that right now because they wouldn't like that talk, but just the idea that was all hitting me at once. But I'm glad you mentioned the not looking ahead. Obviously, they can't look ahead to anything right now. They got one more game, win or lose, with the season on the line. But I'm curious about kind of your thoughts going into that because I looked at the line, and we don't do gambling stuff, but I do look at the lines here. And I mean, 8.5. This was the last I looked. It might have moved a little bit. I looked, I think, 24 hours ago. It was 8.5 and 47.5 points. Those both seem a little high to me, but I'm a fan that's worried about what could go wrong and all of that. And obviously with Signetti, not a lot has gone wrong. They've been blowing these lines out of the water. But this Miami team is tough. They're good in the trenches. Yeah. Indiana has established their advantage in those trenches with the lines, and Miami has very good lines. They're coached by an offensive lineman. So I'm curious how you see all of those things coming together. Not necessarily a game prediction, but that's, I'm sure, stuff that you've studied and been in these rooms doing interviews about these subject matters that have come up.
Yeah, I think the one thing about this Indiana team and the way that Signetti preaches, he's very selective in what he says and what he emphasizes. And so I think what you see with this team is like they might be, heavy favorites line-wise, but I think a lot of these guys still carry the same chip. And regardless of heavy underdogs, heavy favorites, whatever it may be, their process, their preparation period, their mentality is so improvement-driven and so rigid. I mean, the way that Signetti schedules things, and again, how he speaks in team meetings, how they practice, how intense he is when they are practicing, there really is no let-up. And so, it's not like there's a big mindset shift for them. If you ask them, I mean, I think it was Aiden Fisher had said this before the Rose Bowl, that you look at their team, none of the guys on that, a very small number of guys on that team were recruited by any of the schools who were in the playoff originally, right? Like, I'm not sure how many of these guys were recruited by Miami. I can't imagine it was a very high portion of it. So a lot of them still carry a chip in that regard, and a lot of them, also the ones that return. I think it was Isaiah Jones said to me after the Rose Bowl, he's like, you always have a chip when you play at Indiana, because it's Indiana, because you can't just erase the past, because people always have that perception of who you were as a program before the last 2 years. And so I don't think that they're very worried about, oh my goodness, now we're favored, how are we going to handle this? I don't think there's a pressure element at all for them. I think it's very much so we know who we are, and we're going to stick to what's gotten us here. And I think that's why they've been so successful the whole playoff run, no matter how bright the lights have gotten, how big the stage has gotten. For them, it's just another week, and they've done it's honestly incredible to watch so many 18 to 23-year-old kids be able to just block everything out and just focus. It's really an incredible coaching job, in my opinion.
Definitely. And you talk about, I'm glad you highlighted kind of the recruits. Now they're clearly showing that they're up to the task, playing very well. Mendoza looks like he's maybe headed to the number 1 overall pick in the draft here. Not that he's looking ahead to that. I know he's not. But I remember this graphic, so I wanted to pull it up as you're talking about that. They brought this up for the semifinal, but as far as the final teams go, that Miami has 5 5-star recruits initially and 44 stars. Indiana has 0 5-stars and only 7 4-stars. They only have 2 more 4-star recruits than Miami had 5-star recruits, and obviously it's going to then pool in kind of the 2 to 3-star range. So it's good to highlight that. I mean, there's so many stories to highlight, and we're going to have Daniel back on after the college football playoff final so that we can review some things for him and hopefully get to stretch out a little bit. But you've got the Mendoza matchup coming from Miami. You know, he wasn't recruited from there. That's an interesting storyline. But the fact that Cignetti is going against somebody from his coaching tree as a defensive coordinator, where that defensive coordinator is used to coaching with and against the coaches that he's going to go against here is just a very interesting storyline that I don't feel like is being highlighted not enough. You guys did it very well. One of your colleagues wrote an article about it on IU on SI.
Yeah, it really is. It's such an ironic ordeal, right? Of like all the ties with Miami, with Mendoza, with all. It's kind of it gives Fernando a cool chance, I think, right, for like a big storybook ending, right? Like I mean, to end it at Indiana, playing in Miami, playing in front of his hometown, like I mean, playing in the stadium that he grew up a mile away from. I thought about that a little bit today about how it's almost the perfect touch if Indiana can win that game. I mean, it's been an absolute Hollywood type of movie, I think, for your star Heisman-winning quarterback who's been the engine behind this whole thing to kind of have a chance to wrap it all up at home. It's an incredible ordeal, right? Like, I mean, you can't draw it up much better than that. I mean, it's I think for Fernando, it's really, really neat experience. And again, a lot of these guys, when Tom Allen was at IU, I mean, that staff plucked into Miami quite a bit. They had a lot of good recruiting ties in Florida. And so it's kind of neat. There's a handful of guys who played there who hung around with Cignetti. I mean, there's a handful of guys that he brought over. I think Pons had mentioned this after the win over Oregon, that he had a pick on Fernando in high school, which is, you know, crazy, right? And so, I mean, it's a very full circle experience, and I think it's going to be neat for them. I think it'll be cool to kind of see the crowd. I mean, it's being played in Miami's home stadium, obviously, but like it's Indiana fans travel, right? I mean, largest living alumni base, a lot of guys who graduated straight out of Kelly who are doing very well for their highly well off, right? And so, and again, it's a fan base that's super loyal, extremely passionate, and hasn't really been able to experience this level of success ever. So I think Indiana will travel extremely well. I think that'll be really neat to see. And I think the crowd-wise could end up being about half and half, and it'll be interesting, right? I mean, it's on paper a home game for Miami, but it wouldn't shock me if that place is primarily red.
I'm glad you brought that piece of it up, because you've got an Indiana team. You highlighted it well. I'm from the Kelly School too, so shout out to the business school at Indiana. But I wouldn't be surprised if Indiana kind of dominates maybe it's a 50-50. That would be an accomplishment to get to 50-50, and then dominates the noise part of the game. It'll be interesting to be there and see how loud it gets on both sides. But Miami, I mean, not that they have a bad fan base, but the Florida teams inherently, because they have such nice weather, they have a lot of things going on down there. The games are notoriously not always well attended. I don't think that's going to be an issue for the college football playoff final, but who's going to that? Who's paying for that? Who's able to get seats for that? It'll be an interesting game. I appreciate you coming on to preview it. I know we got to get you out of here by 8, but we're looking forward to having Daniel on next week to review it, and make sure to tell people where they can follow you before we get you out of here.
Yes, sir. As always, I'll plug the website, si.com/college/Indiana for Hoosiers on SI content. Highly appreciative of you, man, having me on, and really excited to come back and recap it next week.
Definitely. Hopefully we're recapping a win here for IU, but either way, it's going to be an exciting game. And thanks for joining us. And we'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely, man. All right.
Thanks, Daniel. Take care. All right, thanks, Daniel Flick. We had to kind of do that in a bit of a flurry, but it was a good segment here setting up. I'm sure Jeff and I will talk about IU a little bit here towards the end as we do our segments, but we got one more guest in between. We've got Billy Riccette of Lions Wire coming on to talk about his views on the Lions. Haven't had him on either show this year, so I want to talk some offensive coordinator stuff and everything else going on with the Lions. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. We're going to be doing Lions coverage all season here, all off season, because there's always going to be stuff to talk about. Just like this week, the main conversation point is the offensive coordinator search that's been made a little bit more complicated, Billy, by the fact that now there's a lot of, I think it's 28% of the league needs a head coach. So I always compare it to musical chairs, and then the music stops and you hope you get the right person sitting in the right chair. But that's the big conversation piece this week. So I'm curious what you think of the offensive coordinator search so far, and maybe the Lions season as a whole. Maybe that's where we should start, because the Lions, are we overreacting a little bit to a team that went 9-8, beat their division rival, the Bears, who now are maybe making a run in the playoffs? I don't know if we want to sound the alarm too much, but they're also going to be trying to fill in some of these gaps, starting with the offensive coordinator and then some of the holes on the field. But where do you lie with the season as a whole here?
Yeah, for sure. First off, thanks for having me. Great to be back on with you guys.
Definitely.
It's been a while. Great to talk to you. The offensive coordinator search obviously is going to be a big story here in Detroit. Like you said, it's there's a lot of openings, which is pretty crazy. The news came out earlier today that they're going to be that they're potentially looking at Arthur Smith, the former, I think we can assume, former offensive coordinator of the Steelers, now that Mike Tomlin stepped down. Smith, he certainly, his offenses are kind of meh. I know they're not very exciting, and I don't know if that would be a great fit here in Detroit. I'm sure, obviously, the bigger names like the Mike McDaniels in the world. I think Mike McDaniel certainly would be interesting. We know he's a brilliant offensive mind. We know things kind of tampered off a little bit in Miami, and that's what led to him being fired. But we know his offenses can be very exciting. I think he could work with a guy like a Jared Goff, get him the ball, just let him get the ball to his playmakers. And I think, we saw the run game with Devon Achane in Miami. He became one of the better running backs in the league. I'm really curious. I'd be really curious to see what he could do with a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, and especially if David Montgomery kind of starts to go off to the side, so to speak. They finally let Gibbs be that true number one. I think the sky's the limit for him, and with someone like McDaniel, I think that'd be really, really fun to watch. I think if they end up landing, and obviously McDaniel's going to get some head coaching interest, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out.
That's the part that I was going to hit next, because he does seem like a guy that maybe would need to take a step back down to go back up, that he would be eligible to go back up in a year or two. So then you got to factor that in if you're the Lions and say, okay, if we get this guy and he's as successful as we want him to be, then is he going to necessarily be there for very long, or is he going to want to be part of a head coaching? Is he going to want to be a head coach somewhere else in the league, because that's ultimately probably where he wants to go again? The other part of the Mike McDaniel thing, I talked about this with our analyst last week. I'm just not sure of the fit with McDaniel and Campbell. I know people are a little bit more confident in this than me. Jeff just lit his mic up, so I'm going to want the opinion of both you guys here. Billy, what do you think of this fit with McDaniel? Because I don't know what the scale is, but I've been looking at a college or a head coach scale a spectrum in the NFL where Campbell's kind of at one side. I don't want to call it toughness, but there's an authenticity element. There's a bunch of things, and Campbell's kind of at the one side. And I've always viewed the other side of the scale as Mike McDaniel. And it's a lot of different things encompassed there, but I just don't know if they would fit. I could see it something being in like an odd couple scenario where they fit in that way and he gives Campbell what he needs. I could also see it being a former head coach coming back down to offensive coordinator and then not meshing with an established culture-based head coach. So I'm curious where you lie on kind of that spectrum of potential results between those two specifically.
Yeah, no, I think you make an incredible point there. I fully agree with that because we know Mike McDaniel certainly likes to be, if you want to say buddy with players, whereas Dan Campbell, he can obviously be a good guy, but when he needs to be tough and run a tight ship, he absolutely does. So I think that's a great point. I think you also brought up a really great point too in terms of, is this like a 1-year stopgap, right? Would McDaniel take this job to kind of resurrect himself, so to speak, give him a break from a 1-year break from head coaching, and then get back into the cycle in 2027? We obviously see coaches do that very often. We might see that with a guy like Robert Saleh, who took a year, went back to defensive coordinator, had a great year, may end up getting another head coaching gig next season. So I think we could be on that path if he wants to go. So I think that possibility is very realistic. And again, I think you brought up, I love the odd couple thing there. I think that's a great way to put it because you're right. These two guys certainly have very differing personalities. Can their offenses mesh together? Will Campbell take on kind of McDaniel's style? Will McDaniel be good with Dan Campbell's aggressiveness? I think that would be really intriguing to watch if that were to happen.
I agree. And I mean, that's the juxtaposition between him and Morton is interesting to me because Morton was kind of maybe extending the wrong part of Dan Campbell and he was a little older school. Jeff, I'm curious about your take on this because you've been following this and it is, I could see it really going either way. That's why I'm throwing it out to you guys. I don't really have a formed opinion. I like to get I like to get opinions from experts like Billy and talk it out with people like you. But I mean, we know they're not going to be sharing each other's sunglasses. I know that. But other than that, how do you think this is going to go?
No, you said exactly what I was going to say. This would be truly the odd couple. It really would. So the interesting part to me is Mike McDaniel, he's only 42 years old. So I believe it would be definitely either one, maybe if we got lucky, 2 years. But how smart is he? He looks smart. Everyone says he's smart. He's an offensive genius. The smart thing for me is go to Detroit, build your name back up, get that Miami stink off you, and then go back out you're 42 years old. I mean, to get back in as a head coach at 44 and probably with a better selection of teams right now. I mean, you go to Cleveland, you go to Tennessee, you're just going to get buried. To me, this is the smartest move. And if he's as smart as he looks and it's the way he talks, it's got to be Detroit. And yeah, it would be fun to see if these two would. Can you imagine, sharing outfits and stuff like that? The style is so outrageously different. If he stood on the sideline too next to Campbell, being 5'8", 5'9", and Campbell being so big, that would be even better.
Exactly. Jeff, as somebody that's 42, I appreciate you saying only 42. As somebody that's also 42, like McDaniel. But no, I really could see this either way. One of the reasons I brought this up to you guys is because I want to compare it to another open position. I I'm under the impression that he's not going to be able to get a head coaching gig in this cycle. I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility. I think it's in the discussion, but I think there's probably enough other people to fill the chairs here of the up and coming coaches, and they'll take a chance at somebody that hasn't been a head coach. And as Jeff said, kind of take a year or two, get your reputation rehabilitated, and then move back up. But the other job out there that is competitive, so I think the Lions are one of the best jobs. It's not subjective to the local market. Objectively one of the best jobs for an offensive coordinator. The other one is the Eagles, because they have a lot of built-in pieces there. It's a little bit more tumultuous there. It's a different situation where the culture is maybe not as strong, but they have a lot of different options. But I'm curious, Billy, how you see the difference in fit, because it seems like he'd get along with Sirianni better than Campbell. So if he's sitting in one of those interviews, I don't know which one he'd get along better. He seems more like he'd fit in with kind of the swagger of Sirianni, but do they clash because they're not an odd couple? That those two jobs being put up next to each other, where the Eagles have come out and said, hey, our two top choices right now are Mike McDaniel and Brian Daboll, who are different from each other and an odd couple in their own right. I don't know how to take those two jobs being open at the same time. How do you see that?
Yeah, I agree. I think this. I think that would be really intriguing. I know there's certainly a lot in the Eagles world that would love Mike McDaniel as well. And I think if he does take the Philadelphia job, I feel like he would have more control over the offense in Philadelphia than he would in Detroit, because we know Nick Sirianni is kind of that CEO type coach, right? He kind of lets his, depending on the flow of the season, certainly. But, you look at the last few years, specifically the 2 years that they went to the Super Bowl, he kind of stayed back because he knew he had an offense coordinator that was able to get it done, right? 2022 was Shane Steichen, 2024 it was Kellen Moore, and then the years that they bottomed out in the playoffs, the offensive coordinator struggled. You look at this year, Kevin Patullo just never got it done, and we saw the end result. So I think with McDaniel, I think certainly the Eagles are looking for that kind of veteran offensive mind to really kind of unlock guys like Jalen Hurts, guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, all those guys, and really kind of get them back to that elite status that they had last season when they won the Super Bowl, right? And I think McDaniel could be that guy to kind of unlock that potential. They certainly have to fix the offensive line, get themselves healthy again there. As far as clashing, you're talking about two guys that both can kind of be buddy-buddy. We know Sirianni can be kind of a weird, but in a good way, if that makes sense. And McDaniel, I think, is sort of that same style. So I think that would be a fascinating pairing if McDaniel were to go to Philadelphia from that standpoint.
The personalities involved in this are very interesting to me. We spent longer on McDaniel than I expected, but that's going to be one of the biggest names, and I think I could see him going to one of those two teams. So then that chair gets filled, then the other job kind of becomes that top job to go to as an offensive coordinator as of right now. But you've got to wait for the aspiring head coaches, because that's kind of the chess game you're playing too, because the aspiring head coaches are going to wait. Sure, that's a good offensive coordinator job, but if they think they can leave their current job that's propelled them to a potential head coaching job, they're going to go there first and take those interviews. So we'll talk about some of the other candidates here after the break, because there's some other ones in the mix, and I want to get Billy's overall take of the Lions heading into next season. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM.
From the Scully Statewide Moving Studios. Country with a twist. Jethro FM, 1530 AM, WYGR, Wyoming, Grand Rapids, 94.9 FM, Grand Rapids, 99.5 FM, Lowell, and Jethro South, 980 AM, WAKV Otsego, Plainwell, 98.9 FM, Otsego, and 105.1 FM, Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.
McDaniel's certainly an interesting guy. We were still talking about him in the break, but I'm curious about some of the other names that kind of stick out to you. I have a couple. There's some that have been requested. We're trying to figure out kind of who has been requested, like we were talking about in the previous segment. You got to wait for that head coaching stuff to kind of the carousel to stop there to interview some. But then also, if you wait too long, then maybe your guy's being hired by somebody else. But are there some other guys that stick out to you as potential fits that you'd like to see in Honolulu Blue on the sideline?
Yeah, there's a couple of names here. Yesterday they interviewed Mike Kafka, the former offensive coordinator of the Giants, interim head coach. Was there for 4 years. The Giants' offense certainly had their ups and downs. Injuries played a part, but I think we saw last year with an intriguing quarterback. We were excited to see Jackson Dart, and he had his moments. And we saw the really good running of Cam Scadaboo. So I think you pair Kafka with a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that could be interesting to watch. Jake Peets, pass game coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks, another interesting name I think here because we saw how good the Seahawks offense was. It was another kind of chance on Sam Darnold, paying him all that money, and it paid off big time. Sam Darnold had one of the best, if not the best, seasons of his career. Certainly helped any other guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba to throw to, but Jake Peets certainly a part of that. Certainly helped get that passing game. And we know Seattle, they were a team that had to run the ball a lot under Pete Carroll, but now with this new staff, you really started to see them really kind of air it out a little bit more. Not extensively, but enough that it was definitely explosive at times. And I think you could certainly have that in Detroit with Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. So I think Pete's is another intriguing name there. And then they also interviewed Zach Robinson, former offensive coordinator of the Falcons, but there's certainly question marks there too because there's talent on that Falcons offense, and they just never kind of really got it going. Outside of Bijan Robinson, obviously, and again injuries at the quarterback position, to Michael Penix, and Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins, so that's kind of a coin flip, but at least he'd certainly have, again, plenty of talent to work with in Detroit. If he can get Jahmyr Gibbs going like he did Bijan Robinson, then, who knows what can happen there. I think, you could be looking at, Gibbs at 1,200 rushing yards. Maybe he goes for 1,600 if they just keep getting him the ball. You could even say 2,000 all-purpose yard or 2,000 total yards. Excuse me. If he just keeps giving them the ball like he did with Bijan. So those are a couple of the names. Again, we touched on Arthur Smith at the beginning, but I know a lot of people certainly have their reservations about him as well. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do if any of these guys start to rise up more as candidates. And these are certainly guys that I don't think you have to worry about getting head coaching gigs. So, the seat is certainly open for these guys if they want it in Detroit.
Robinson and Kafka are the two that I was going to highlight. So I'm glad you hit on those. Robinson is one of those guys that you feel like that should be good on paper to a degree. He was with the Rams. He was underneath a bunch of guys, not only in the McVay tree, but now a bunch of guys that have become head coaches in their own right. Liam Cohen, a couple other guys there with the Rams. But I think that's going to come down to, I think the biggest part of that probably isn't even going to be the interview. I got to think it's going to be Jared Goff's opinion of him, because he played with him for 1 year with the Rams. And like you said, he's got a little bit of a questionable history with what we know are talented quarterbacks. Goff didn't have a great year when he was part of the coaching staff and his quarterbacks coach. Stafford also didn't have his best year, and now he's having some of his best years of his career with the Rams after that as his age accelerates. Then you've got him with the Falcons, clearly talented offensive team. Yes, it was hard to get the quarterback continuity with an aging Kirk Cousins and an injured Michael Penix Jr. But between all of those, it's like I want to like that as a choice, and I think I could work my way into it if they do end up with him. But I can see that going either way. I think the coin flip was the best way to describe that. And then I like Kafka. That's a guy that's interesting to me. And anybody that's questioning, well, okay, the Giants didn't have a great offensive year this year. Why are we so high on him? They elevated him to interim coach. That's usually a good sign, good vote of confidence. It's always funny to me that you can't really be interim head coach and then get hired to be the head coach. It happens occasionally, but it doesn't happen very often. So he's in that position. So now he's probably on the open market. But anybody that's questioning his ability to call the game, he's had a lot of injuries, and just watch that Lions game, because he was the offensive coordinator for the Lions-Giants game this year. And that was one of the best called games that I've seen against them, even if they did have some defensive struggles on their own end.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, and Kafka, he learned from the best, right? He worked under Andy Reid for a few years in Kansas City. Obviously played a couple years with the Eagles. The guy's smart. The guy knows what he's doing. Like you said, there were injuries. I mean, it's tough to, and with all due respect to guys like, Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton and some of those guys, the Giants didn't really have anybody that struck fear in opposing defenses, right? Once Malik Neighbors went down with that injury, things just tailed off for them. But, they still were treading water, and that's due to the leadership of Mike Kafka. And like you said, it's a good sign that he was the one that was given the interim gig. So, yeah, he may not be the flashy name, but I think he can come in, he can, work well with Jared Goff, work well with this offense, and I think he'd be kind of an underrated hire, and I think he would work well with Dan Campbell here.
I agree. Another guy that was an interim head coach that wasn't a ballyhooed interim head coach, had to work his way back up again, and then got the job with the Lions. Wasn't really a high profile hire at the time, but has worked out well. So I could see that pairing worked. There's a lot of different possibilities here, but that was one that stuck out to me after that Giants game, because like you said, Neighbors was out, Scadaboo was out, you had Jameis Winston as the quarterback, Jackson Dart was out. All the pieces that he was working with well, that were younger guys, first, second year guys, those guys all went down, and he was doing a pretty decent job with some pieces that talent-wise, like you said, no offense to those guys, it's next man up, but talent-wise, we're kind of one of the lower-rated groups in the NFL with what they were working with by the end of the year. So it'll be interesting to follow. We'll be following the offensive coordinator search on the show, but I'm just curious what your off-season wish list is here for before we get you out of here. Just the idea of what are we looking for on the Lions side of things? Who do you see them moving on from? What are some of the needs to address in draft and free agency? I know that's a long. There's a lot of different answers to that question, but what are some of the kind of quick hitting things that kind of come to your mind first?
Got to shore up the offensive line, and not just interior, but we could be talking bookend as well. What's the status of Taylor Decker? He sounded like a guy that could be hanging up the cleats at some point. So you got to figure out the left tackle position. Whether that's sign someone or draft someone, put them there, move Panay Sewell, whatever the case may be. But got to get a tackle, got to get interior taken care of as well. Graham Glasgow is not going to be there forever. You got to figure out what you're going to do at the center position. Fortunately, one of the guard positions is pretty locked down, I think, now. Tate Ratledge, the rookie, had a very good season, really kind of settled into his own. They worked him at center a little bit preseason, moved him to guard, and he really settled in. That was more of his natural position anyway. The other guard, though, I don't know. Christian Mahogany was kind of up and down. He had some injuries, so some question marks there. Defensively, got to figure out what you're going to do at the edge position. As great as Aiden Hutchinson is, he can't do it all, and that was where it was a pleasant surprise to see a guy like Al-Qadim Muhammad really step up and have a fantastic season. 11 sacks, 59 pressures. He's a free agent. You could argue that he is the priority free agent here for the Lions on defense. And then Alex Anzalone, got to get him. We got to try to get him back in the mix as well, because him and Jack Campbell, what a group that was, especially Campbell. That was at least now that's a really good core piece now to build around on the defense. But I think it'd be good to get Anzalone back in as well. And then cornerback depth, got to figure that out as well. And Meek Robinson, Rockison, both free agents. So you got to figure out, especially a guy like Robertson, because he was kind of that do-it-all guy, right? He could play outside, he could play inside. He was the one that really stepped up when all these injuries were coming through throughout the secondary. And then certainly, just got to figure out what you're going to do without Brian Branch, right? What are you going to do at the safety position? Because you're obviously not going to see Brian Branch for quite some time, really. I mean, the timing of that injury obviously was brutal. He's at most, I should say, questionable for the start of the season. I mean, you're probably not going to see him till October, maybe November. So really going to be interesting to see, because once those guys went down, him and Kirby Joseph, once they went down, things just the wheels just fell off, right? So really going to be interesting to see how they address the safety position this offseason as well.
That's one of the sneaky ones here, because it's a safety-based defense to a degree. They've kind of built it around the talents of those two, and like you said, you saw the back end kind of drop off when the back end dropped off there, and you've got those names that you mentioned. I mean, even if they re-sign three of the guys that could be in the mix here, Avonte Maddox, Amik Robertson, and Rocky Sin, you still have some work to do. Those are veteran guys that played pretty well, especially at stretches here. And so you've got to get those guys potentially back in the mix, and then still get some depth pieces, because you hit it on the head. Branch isn't going to be back for a little while, and you don't know what's going on with Joseph's knee, at least right now. And it's hard. It's going to be hard to be confident in that when the season starts, even if he's looking healthy. So and obviously the offensive line and the defensive end position were arguably needs last year. They tried to address the offensive line piece. That was a little bit of a mixed bag with Ratledge, and then Mahogany didn't work out quite as well. And then I'm glad you highlighted Muhammad, because people are looking at that as a failure on the defensive end side, but he was a good defensive end, and they just maybe need to layer in another guy or two, somebody that's a little more stout against the run. But it'll be interesting to follow the offseason. We'll be following them here every week. We'll have Billy back on to help us analyze things, but appreciate you joining the show, and want to make sure to highlight your work and direct the people to where they can follow you here.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Yeah, Billy _Riccette, Riccette on Twitter, Lions Wire, Bengals Wire. Just started some work over at Roundtable as well, covering a couple teams there. So kind of all over the place here, but yeah, still doing some Lions work for sure. And would love to come back and chat with you guys, especially as we get through the off season. I'm really excited, especially for this draft. I think it's going to be a really intriguing one. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Definitely. We'll be doing a lot of draft coverage here. And I did see that you're writing for Bengals Wire now. So now we got a contact there, which is good. So, and
yes,
especially since the namesake on the show, that's his team that he's been most associated with here, Shayne Graham. So we had him on to cover the Bengals for us, and then he became a fixture. But we'll definitely have you back on, and appreciate you joining the show here. And we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Billy. Take care. Thanks to Billy Riccette. Appreciate him joining us here. Now we're to the end of the guest list here, but we got we're a break behind, so we got to take a couple breaks in here, and we got to talk with Jeff about his opinions on some of these things. He's been listening in with the show. We got him in a little bit with that last segment, but want to talk a little bit more Lions, a little bit more college football playoff, and the playoffs as a whole on the NFL side. We'll try to preview this week here, so we'll try to cover that in the next 27 minutes or so. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Talk about the Erik Kramer interview because he was having some good expressions here. That's an interesting backstory. That's only part one, too. I could see this going 4 parts here, Jeff, because we're not even to his NFL career, and I think his post career is going to need 2 parts for sure.
Absolutely. Incredible story. And I can't wait for the audiobook because that's in my truck that I drive daily. That's how I get books, and is with the audiobook. So when he said that, I was like, yeah, I got to grab that. Absolutely.
That it's a great one. I read the Kindle version, but I'm with Jeff. I'd prefer an Audible book if I can get one, but wanted to make sure to follow it for the show and make sure to download that podcast too, because if for any true crime fans, that's a good one, especially if you're a sports fan too, presumably listening to the show you are. So excited to have him back on and to kick off that interview series. But I'm curious what your thoughts. I know we've been talking some Indiana football here, Jeff. What do you have on this game? Because you've been following this story, especially because of the show and because of me here. But I'm a little bit of a nervous fan. I kind of am doing the well, if this happens, they could lose the game. But from your objective opinion, what do you have on the Indiana Miami game? What do you have as a preview here?
Well, everything I've heard and I've listened to this week they keep saying Miami has got to play almost a perfect game, that they got to play their best game, the most perfect game. I'm on the other side. I think Indiana has played so well. I think Miami's defensive interior, that defensive line, I think it's going to give Indiana trouble. And I think Indiana's got to out-physical that defensive line. If Miami comes out, I think their first goal is they got to be more physical, because that whole Signetti, that mindset of we're not just going to outplay you, we're going to out-physical, we're going to do everything. We're not going to have penalties, we're not going to turn the ball over, and we're going to out-physical you and do everything. We're going to put our will in. That's what I'm saying. I'm more worried about Indiana's offensive line because I think their key, they've got to run the football. They've got to run the football for their play action and opening that passing game up. And if Miami is getting pressure on the quarterback and they're causing havoc and Indiana is not able to run the football, it's going to be closer than and it's going to be a low scoring. I couldn't believe the 47.5 points. Or the spread 8.5. To me, that's just too much.
I'm with you. I mean, it's the old quote: everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, and there are going to be some punches thrown here. These are 2 tough-minded coaches. Cristobal's got an offensive line background. That's a tough team, and that's why I mentioned the line earlier, and you did too, Jeff. I mean, these are 2 that both lines really on the Miami side. You've got prospects. Not that it's all about the prospects, but that Ruben Bain on Miami, he presumably is the first defensive end taken in the NFL draft as of right now. So that's a top prospect. Misador on the other side has been a great bookend there as well. I think he had 15, something like 12 or 15 sacks this season. He seems healthy coming back from his injury. And that was the issue for Indiana in years past, especially last year. They had a great team, but when they matched up against teams that clearly had a lot of 5-star style recruits, the one issue wasn't effort, it wasn't anything like that. It was the fact that you looked across to the person on your other side and they had a size, speed, strength advantage. Now, last year that kind of did them in. They had trouble against the Ohio States and Notre Dames of the world, even Michigan. They barely beat Michigan last year when they were kind of going through their tough stretch, just because that was a lot of big boys that they were going against. This year, it's different. They got bigger recruits, but they still don't always have that advantage. And against Miami, I don't think they're going to have that advantage. I think you brought up one of the main points that I wanted to mention, because I'm big on game script. It's hard to predict a game because it really comes down to, okay, what's happening in the game? If Indiana starts out and Miami gets off to a 14-0 lead, that's going to change the game script. They're not going to be able to run as much. It's going to put more pressure on Mendoza, but it's true for the other side too. If you make Beck throw 50 times in a game, I don't think that's going to go well for Miami, even though he's a very accomplished quarterback. He's had a resurgent career after his time at Georgia. He's looked very good. He was, I believe, one of those high recruits coming out of Georgia and then over to Miami. This is nothing against him, but both of those teams are built on their running games. That tandem for Indiana and that Fletcher is no joke for Miami. He was the guy that basically won them that first game. That was their worst game in the college football playoffs so far, that where they kind of had a knockdown drag out fight where nobody could really pass. It was just a lot of running game and defense. So between those things, I'm with you. I don't always, when a team's overhyped, not overhyped, but hyped up, it does make me a little nervous. But if there's anybody that can quell the hype and keep their teams focused, where my confidence kind of comes back in is in a guy like Curt Cignetti, who's going to be very confident, keep his team confident and keep his team focused. They're not going to I'm not worried about them getting lost in the bright lights of this game or the Miami scene, because sometimes that can get people, especially young people. If you look at the statistics of teams playing against the Miami Heat over the course of a season, if they have a night in Miami, their record against the spread is terrible, because they're out in South Beach there, and Cignetti's keeping a very tight leash on these guys. So that's the part that kind of brings me back into being confident. But Mario Cristobal is no joke as a coach too, and he's going to have his team ready.
Right. And I've been waiting for Beck to make a mistake, because for some reason, even at Georgia, he will make a mistake. He will make a bad interception, and we have not seen that in this playoff run. And I was reading an interesting stat this morning. In these playoffs, Beck, over 20 yards passing the ball, is 1 for 11 in these playoffs. So if Indiana, he cannot throw the ball long. He loses, and he crumbles under pressure. I saw that at Georgia and at Miami. He just seems like he does not like a high pressure game. And that stat, 1 of 11 from over 20 yards passing.
And if I remember correctly, I think that one, I'm trying to run through the college football playoffs so far. There was a Tony, their dynamic freshman receiver. There was a Tony catch where it was a short catch and he ran for a while. I think that might actually be the 20-yarder, and that makes a big difference, because that's essentially like 0 of 11.
Right.
If that was a 5-yard crosser or a little bit of a screen pass and he took it for 40 yards, that's not necessarily anything Beck did. That was more on the receiver. So it's a good point. I think it's going to come down to game script, and if Indiana's behind, I'm trusting Mendoza more than I'm trusting Beck from behind, even though they both one has kind of the pedigree and the other has the growth throughout. I think Mendoza's growth arc has been more kind of straight up as far as his time at California and then over to IU, and then Beck's is a little bit more up and down, but he's recovered a little bit at Miami, but still has his weaknesses. So it'll be an interesting matchup. I'll be there with Mom. We'll be there, and we'll be able to to hopefully do a live report on Sports Intel. It'll be my first show that I'll miss, but Steve will be filling in from the Sports Project, and we're going to try to do a call in the opening segment where we do a live report from Miami with IU in the college football playoff final, which was not a sentence that I ever saw myself saying, both on the IU side and radio side. So that should be fun.
How fun is that?
Exactly. So I'm happy about that. Want to talk a little bit about the NFL playoffs, but we got to take a break here, and then Jeff and I will jump into some Lions talk, but definitely some NFL playoffs as well. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. But I'm curious what you got on the playoffs here. I know you keep up on a lot of the sports, especially the NFL. These are some interesting matchups in the second round here for the playoffs. I was kind of previewing them a little bit as you were trying to figure out the comms issues, but I'm sure you didn't hear what I said there. But the all of these are good matchups. I feel like all of them have a lot of intrigue, and I'm curious what kind of sticks out to you from the matchups here that we're headed into the second round of the playoffs.
I like the Buffalo-Denver game. I still think that I don't think so much of Josh, the quarterback of Buffalo, that he's got all the pressure on, but this coach, if he doesn't make the Super Bowl, I mean, his kryptonite has been Kansas City, and he's lost to Baltimore. And these two teams are not in the playoffs, but Denver and that defense is for real. And we're going to find out how good Bo Nix is in this playoff game, because to me, this is Bo Nix. I mean, his defense is going to let him win that game. Can Bo Nix step up and win this football game? And you're going up against, I don't like Denver's coach. To me, he just rubs me the wrong way, but he is one of the best, and he's so smart. If Buffalo, I can't remember, Sean Payton, which Shayne Graham actually played for Sean, so okay. we'll have to get his tip, because we've talked about his relationship with Sean a little bit. He played, I think, 1 or 2 years there in New Orleans with him, and so it didn't have the most experience with him, but he's played for some great coaches. Sean Payton's probably a Hall of Fame coach, whether Absolutely. You like him or don't. Bill Belichick is obviously a Hall of Fame coach. He played for him, so he played under some great coaches, but Sean Payton is one of those guys that kind of goes one way or the other. He kind of rides that line of brash, overconfident, or confident enough. That's kind of a thin line. So brash. But I think if the Buffalo, I can't remember the Buffalo's coach. I want to say
Sean McDermott.
I think if he does not get to the Super Bowl, he's gone. I think, and that's why I was so surprised that Harbaugh is going to go to the Giants. I thought for sure he'd be sitting waiting for this Buffalo team, because you just bring him in and it's almost automatically going to the Super Bowl with a coach like Harbaugh.
This is a bizarro world game for me, because the Bills, all those things about the Bills that you said are true, yet they're a 1.5 point favorite against the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. But I can also see why, because I don't have those numbers pulled up, but I would be willing to bet that they're one of the Super Bowl favorites still, even from the position that they're in, that they'd have to win 3 road games to get to the Super Bowl, because of that dynamic offense, because Josh Allen is maybe the best remaining player in the playoffs as a whole, which is often what the role that Mahomes is cast in. It's hey, the team isn't necessarily always there. Their defense got better over the years. He always had Travis Kelce and some weapons on offense, but it was the best remaining player versus the best remaining team often when it was Mahomes. Both times he matched up against the Eagles, it kind of had that feel. And so I think that's Allen to a degree with that matchup against the Broncos. But that would be, I mean, man, if you were a coach it would be worth waiting for that Bills job, because
Absolutely.
you get to step in and coach Josh Allen, and that team is ready to go. There's not a lot of changes that need to be made there, not a lot of major ones, other than maybe the coach. I was talking about the Seahawks 49ers a little bit, I think, when we got back on air, but that's an interesting matchup between a guy that briefly played for the 49ers and Sam Darnold, and then you've got the fact that they've got to play 3 times, which is always a little bit tricky. And I've been telling people all the last few weeks here on both shows that's probably the best division in the NFL. It's just underrated because it's West Coast. You can relate to that because you probably don't catch a lot of West Coast games with your schedule, even though the football schedule is conducive to catching them because they're just playing at 4:00 here most of the time.
No, I don't.
But that's a good that's going to be a good matchup, I think, and that one could kind of go either way. It's a 7-point difference favoring the Seahawks, but the 49ers were looking very good down the stretch, and
even with the injuries,
it's
just amazing what they've done.
That's going to be the difficult thing to overcome. I think they picked up more in this previous game. It just seems like it's almost a Lions situation from last year, where have they reached that fever pitch that the Lions, kind of that tipping point that the Lions reached last year, and really at a point this year. Once both safeties went out, that was kind of the tipping point this year, and it was really that Anzalone injury, bringing it back to the Bills, that happened before that Bills game. And then that Bills game, they got torn to shreds on defense. And once Anzalone came back, they kind of resurfaced a little bit. But Texans Texans are sneaky good
that defense
this year.
Is so good.
They all of a sudden, DeMeco Ryans, great defender, younger than 42, by the way. I saw that statistic the other day. He was younger than the quarterback he was facing on the other side. Aaron Rodgers was a year older than DeMeco Ryans when they matched up last week, but that's going to be an interesting matchup because both of those teams, I feel like, haven't really gotten their due. Some people were doing the schedule game with the Patriots a little bit. Hey, their schedule wasn't strong enough, but Drake May is going to be one of the top contenders for the MVP this year. Vrabel's a great coach that should not have gotten let go. I mean, I guess the Ravens and, the Steelers, I guess Tomlin stepped down, but the Ravens didn't really take note of that because Tennessee let Vrabel go, and now they're in total disarray. They ended up with Callahan. He's gone. Now they need a coach again, and Vrabel's back in the playoffs with the Patriots, and he's got the Texans. Like you said, great defense, and Stroud is underrated on that team too.
He is. It's going to come down to me. That one is definitely quarterbacks. Which quarterback makes the fewest mistakes? Because Houston's defense is going to get lots of pressure on Drake May, he is. So to me, that game's come down to the quarterbacks. Who makes the fewest mistakes? They're both capable. Well, Drake doesn't turn the ball over, but Stroud can throw some terrible interceptions. Can he stay turnover free? And I think Houston wins that without any turnovers. With that defense, it's just like, give us 10, 12 points, and we'll take you there, boys.
Stroud's a little more likely to gun it, which is where the turnovers come in, because that's what happened with the Chargers game in the first round. Herbert kind of gunned it a little bit, and that defense, the Patriots defense, is no slouch either. Nope. And they took advantage of those turnovers there, and that's how they won that game. But Rams-Bears is the last one. We talked about that a little bit with Erik, but obviously that's probably the most hometown interest because it's the Bears with Ben Johnson at the helm, division rival against your former quarterback there, who's it's still amazing me there with the Rams, because his longevity and durability, that's been amazing. He's outlasting his receivers there. He's outlasting everybody, and still looking like he could maybe even tack on another Super Bowl if things go right.
If Ben Johnson can win this game, to me, I just don't. As bad as the Bears' defense is, I just don't know how they're going to stop that passing game. I do not see it, even with the weather. Stafford's used to it. He's played in the NFC North for 13, 14 years.
They're another team that benefits heavily from turnovers, and Stafford's not real likely to give you a lot of turnovers, especially in a game like this. So it'll be an interesting slate. We'll be keeping up with the playoffs along with our interview series that we established today and the other coverage. Shayne will be back in the mix here soon, but we'll take another quick break and then close up the show. So stick with us. You listen to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. But be sure to check out the schedule here. You've got a busy schedule for the rest of the week on the Jethro lineup. You got Polka Pops on Saturday. Then you've got the All Request Show with Jeff on Saturday, so be sure to tune into that. Then you got Sports Intel on Monday, but you're going to hear more from Steve Project, who will be doing the Saturday Sports Project show from 10 to 12, but he'll also be doing Sports Intel from 7 to 9. He'll be filling in for me. I'm hoping to do a live report at the beginning of the show, so be sure to tune into that. That'll be fun, and we'll have a full interview schedule there. Then I'll be back next week on Shayne Graham's Extra Points. Be sure to check out the Sports Project in between 7 to 9 on that Wednesday. But I will talk to you not on Monday, but next week, Thursday.
Are you going to have a voice if they win?
I don't know. I'm not much of a yeller, but I don't know how to take in this IU run. So maybe I'll be yelling for the first time. But it'll be fun, and we'll be excited to cover it here on Jethro. So until then, thanks for kicking it with Jeff and I, and have a great week.